بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله الذي هدانا لهذا وما كنا لنهتدي لولا أن هدانا الله. Dear brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. So today's session on Nahj al-Balagha is continuing our discussion on the Imam alayhi salam's letter to Malik al-Ashtar, which, as I mentioned earlier, is the kind of manifest of Islamic governance as portrayed by the commander of faith, Amir al-Mu'minin Ali alayhi salam. He discussed several points, several factors that Imam alayhi salam addressed in the letter. And the last point that we mentioned was about Imam's advice to Malik as the potential governor of Egypt to be just and to avoid nepotism, to avoid giving privileges to the people close to him, and to maintain justice in rule. The part that we are going to cover today is the part that concerned with how to maintain what is fair and how to give priority to public welfare and to interests of the general public over the interests and priorities of the people close to someone, of the privileged people, of the elites of the society, and other kind of points that Imam covers in this part of the letter, in this passage, and the passages that we are going to cover tonight. I'm starting with this part which Imam alayhi salam addresses Malik. وَلِيَكُنْ أَحَبُّ الْأُمُورِ إِلَيْكَ أَوْسَطُهَا فِي الْحَقِّ. Let the most beloved of affairs to you be those that are the most balanced in truth. وَأَعَمُّهَا فِي الْعَدْلِ, and the most comprehensive in justice. وَأَجْمَعُهَا لِرِضَى الرَّعِيَّةِ, and the most inclusive of the satisfaction of the general public, the mass lay people. I'm going to elaborate and explain each part of this short section of the letter. When Imam alayhi salam talks about Imam talks about having balanced approach towards truth. The most beloved of affairs, of approaches to you, Malik, should be the one that is balanced in relation to truth. What does it mean? أوسطها في الحق. What does it mean to be balanced when it comes to truth, to haq, to righteousness? Late Ayatollah Khoi, in his commentary on Nahj al-Balagha, Minhaj al-Bara'a في شرح Nahj al-Balagha, he explains that to be awsat fil haq, to be balanced on righteousness, means to, in his word, أمره برعاية ما هو الأفضل في أداء الحق, to maintain what is the best application of righteousness, application of truth. So then what the meaning would be? So according to late Ayatollah Khoi, it means that you need, when we are going to pick a certain approach, to find which one is most effective in establishing righteousness, in achieving truth. However, if we are going to look more carefully, I think there are more to the uh, wording than just the way that little Ayatollah Khoi mentioned, because the word awsat in Arabic, it means al-mu'tadal min kulli shay. Awsat al-shay means ما بين الطرفين, something is the center, which is the middle of something, just a middle point that has uh, equal distances from the right and left. So to be on the middle, to be balanced. We have also in a famous hadith, a popular hadith, خير الأمور أوسطها. The best of things is the one that is balanced. It is the one that is in the middle. So what does it mean to be in the middle? I think it has to do with negation of two negative approaches. One that neglects truth and one that goes excessive in application of truth. So it's important that one to make sure, especially when it comes to the matter of rule, to adhere to justice, to adhere to truth properly. If, for example, for example, let's say in a criminal kind of the justice system, about the um, criminal law, for the government to neglect certain crimes and does not have proper and appropriate law to punish the wrongdoers, it's a flaw, it's a shortcoming. And also for the government to go excessive in punishing wrongdoers, that's also a flaw. So the best approach is the middle one, is the balanced one, to make sure that you do not neglect matter of truth, but do not also go excessive in what seems to be the right path. Then what Imam mentions later, وَأَعَمُّهَا فِي الْعَدْلِ, which I think is somehow is a complement, is kind of completes the point that Imam mentions here about being balanced on the matter of truth, is to take an approach which is more comprehensive in application of justice. وَأَعَمُّهَا فِي الْعَدْلِ, the most comprehensive in justice. What does it mean to take an approach which is most comprehensive in justice? Let's say the government has to pick a policy on certain matter. Let's say to provide some public services. The decision on who to include and who to exclude from the policy is very important. Imam says, pick the one that is more comprehensive in including people. Do not exclude certain people when it comes to matter of, for example, providing certain services. So the one example maybe that would help in understanding this is the example that is Imam's own approach when it comes to the economic policies. Later on in the letter, we will cover this part when Imam alayhi salam gives it advice to Malik. that واجعل لهم قسما من بيت مالك وقسما من غلات صواف الإسلام في كل بلد, which Imam talks about taking care for the poor people in one's rule. Imam said, set aside for needy a portion from the public treasury under your control, and the portion from the revenue from the lands of Islam in every region. Imam highlights, in every province, every region, you should have these measures to take care for the poor people. And then Imam explains that the reason for him highlighting every region is to have an inclusive system of social services for the one who is far away. So the Imam says that فإن للأقصى منهم مثل الذي للأدنى, for the one who is far away among them has the same right as the one who is near. And you are responsible for safeguarding the right of each of them. So no matter whether people living in urban areas or in rural areas, you are responsible for providing similar comprehensive services. So this is one very beautiful example of a policy that, as Imam mentions, would be more comprehensive in justice. A policy that does not only include certain provinces, does not only include, for example, the urban areas, rather all the provinces, even the ones on the border, the ones far away from the capital, they should receive similar services. And even when we go at the contemporary kind of ruling policies and principles, let's say, for example, in the on the criminal law, for example, the right to access legal representatives. So one approach, for example, would be for the government to provide legal aid only, for example, for criminal cases, and only, for example, in certain provinces, in the urban areas, but not, for example, in the courts that are, for example, in rural areas, less privileged areas. But not to provide legal aid to, let's say, civil cases, civil disputes, for example. Like, for example, disputes about the housing, employment issues, so on and so forth, so forth. So for the government, for example, for the, let's say, for the consideration of the financial, for example, the cost, the government narrows down its support to certain people or certain type of the cases. So this is what Imam alayhi salam instructs against it. Imam sees this policy as a kind of discrimination. So Imam calls for a more comprehensive approach that would provide the same services to not only to criminal cases, but also to civil disputes, not only in urban areas, but also in the less privileged areas, in the rural areas. So I think that's something that can easily be applied on in many areas in today's matter of rule and politics, so on and so forth. And Imam continues his advice. So after he mentioned that you should strive for policies that are balanced in truth, in righteousness, not falling short of achieving truth and not going excessive. When Imam talked about the policy that should be أعمها في العدل, the most comprehensive in justice, and then Imam completes it with this expression وأجمعها لرضا الرعية, and it should be the most inclusive of the satisfaction of the subjects, the general public. Your rule should geared towards satisfying the general public need and not the elites and not the people close to you. In other words, if a government has to choose between two policies, that one gives privileges to the people of power, for example, let's say to the people who run corporates, people who, for example, they are main players in the economy, main players, for example, in politics, so on and so forth, those elites of the community. And a policy that would benefit general public and lay people more at the cost of providing less to the elites. Imam says go for the policy that maintains the interests of the general public and the lay people. And I think this is a very important perspective when it comes to matter of rule. Who takes the priority as a ruler? Do you try to satisfy the people who have the resources, the power, the means to change the situation of the country, for example, to change your rule, the people who may, if they are not satisfied, they may pose threat to you, or you have to gear your policies to protect the public, protect the mass, to protect the lay people. When you look at the Ali alayhi salam's own lifestyle, his own policies, when he took over the rule after the Uthman, you see this advice is being depicted, manifested very beautifully in his own approach. To give you one example, as you may know, that it was at the time of the second Caliph, Umar ibn al-Khattab, that he established a policy, instituted a system where stipends from the public treasury were allocated to the people. However, the system were designed to give people according to their status in Islam or their precedence in Islam and their contribution to the early Muslim community. The elder one was, the more contribution one had, the earlier one converted, the more share and stipend one had from the public treasury. So the new converts, for example, let's say the freed slaves, they had the less stipend from the public treasury. This hierarchical approach meant that even for it was even for the not only for the early companions of the Prophet, not only for the prominent companions of the Prophet, but even for the wives of the Prophet, for example, the family of the Prophet, also they had higher share. So it means that even Ali alayhi salam, in the system that the second Caliph established, he was among the people who could enjoy the higher privilege and higher stipend from the public treasury. However, when Ali took the rule, he changed the system. So he advocated for and implemented a policy that of equal distribution of public fund, and he emphasized that all Muslims, regardless of their background or the timing of their conversion, they were entitled to equal share from the treasury. I assume many of you heard about the famous story of Talha and Zubair, who went to Ali alayhi salam at the time of his rule, complaining about the same matter. That so we are the people who supported you. We are the people who sacrificed everything for you in the wars, in the political scene. We were the people who protected your interest. We called for your rule, and then you took the rule and you are cutting our stipend from the public treasury, and you give me, for example, the same share you give someone who just converted to Islam. And Ali alayhi salam responded that, is your contribution to Islam more than me? And then he said, by Allah, I get the same share from the public treasury that my servant gets from the public treasury. Everyone is equal. Even so, we have in historical accounts, for example, in Tariq al-Tabari, it's mentioned that Imam instructed that the freed slaves, they get the same share, 3 dinars, from the public treasury as anyone else in the community. So Imam implemented a policy that, as he advises Malik, أجمعها لرضا الرعية. It is more satisfactory to the lay people, while on the other hand, it would be unsatisfactory. It would be uh, it would not be something something accepted, pleasant to the people close to him, to the elite of the community, for the people, to the people who were used to get higher share of the public treasury. But you see that the perspective that Ali alayhi salam introduces as the just approach in governance. If you are taking the governance, you are not allowed to distribute public treasure, public wealth, based on someone's spiritual achievement, or for example, someone's, for example, uh, precedence in Islam. These are resources allocated to the whole community, and everyone takes same share. A modern example could be, for example, I think um, the matter of the tax policies. Let's say the government wants to decide on how to tax people. One way would be for the government, for the rule, to try to satisfy those people who have the power, who run the economy, who run, for example, different institutions. For example, the government can decide under the claim that, for example, it would kind of stimulate investment and job creation to lower the income taxes for the wealthy people and for large corporations. We just lower the tax so they can hire more people. So, for example, it actually contributes to the investment in the country on the long term, so on and so forth. So can find excuses to protect the interests of the elites and those privileged people in the community, or the tax policy can be customized, can be geared towards protecting the less privileged people, to put higher tax on the people who are wealthy, who have more than enough to cover for them, and use it for the purpose of providing public services to the lay people, to those poor people in the lower economic classes who rely on basic services for their lives. So you can see what the Imam alayhi salam mentions. Imam gives a criterion that if you are going to pick policies take the one that satisfies the interests of general public and not the one that protects the interests of the privileged and elites in the society. And then Imam explains the reason. فإن السخط العامة يجحف برضا الخاصة وإن السخط الخاصة يغتفر مع رضا العامة. Imam says, because for the displeasure of the common people sweeps away, makes it useless, the satisfaction of the elite. If the general public, they are not satisfied, it doesn't matter that the elites are happy or not. While the displeasure of the elite is excused when the common people are content. However, it's not the case vice versa. If the general public are happy, that's fine. That's what matters the most. So whether those elites are not happy or not, they are not the main elements of safeguarding a rule. It's the general public, it's the lay people, as Imam al-Islam later explains, that what protects a rule, what maintains a rule is the satisfaction of the public and not the elites. And some commentators, including late Ayatollah Khoi, he also elaborates on this point that Imam mentions. And it says that because if he mentions that if a government's policy suppresses people, neglects the interests of the people, which leads to public dissatisfaction, this can lead to public uprising, can lead to public protest, can lead to revolution. And when this happens, those elites cannot do anything to protect the rule. And he provides the example of the third caliph, Uthman ibn al-Khattab, who also took a policy that favored people close to him, especially Bani Umayyads. And he saw some scholars criticize him for nepotism, for giving favors to people related to him. But he did so at the cost of making people dissatisfied, at the cost of making people upset, which led to the uprising that led to his own him being killed because of the chaos that occurred at the time. So later Ayatollah Khoi mentions that this is one of the examples that shows that it is the public satisfaction, general public satisfaction, that matters in the matter of the rule. Because if the public is not happy, elites cannot do anything anymore to protect themselves. And Imam later on explains that it is the public, as I mentioned, Imam said it is the public that protects the country, even at the time of war. It's the people, the mass, the lay people, that they take the burden of defending your country, your rule. Then Imam alayhi salam explains further. He mentions certain attributes, negative attributes of these privileged people close to the rulers, especially at the time we are talking about the time of Imam alayhi salam, which there was no such a concept of democracy. So there were these tyrants who had all the power for themselves, and they were trying to satisfy the people around them. So Imam warns Malik against such a policy. Imam mentions certain attributes for these privileged people to warn Malik that do not put your effort in satisfying them, because وليس أحد من الرعية أثقل على الوالي مؤونة في الرخاء. And Imam says, and none among the subjects of the rule is more burdensome upon the governor in the time of ease, وأقل معونة له في البلاء, less helpful in the times of trial and struggling, suffering, وأكره للإنصاف, and more reluctant to uphold justice, وأسأل بالإلحاف, and more demanding in persistent asking, وأقل شكرا عند العطاء, and less grateful when given, وأبطأ عذرا عند المنع, and slower to excuse when denied. If any service denied from them, they are the ones slower to accept an excuse. They insist that no, we need that service. We need, for example, that fund. We need that, for example, loan, so on and so forth. وأضعف صبرا عند ملمات الدهر من أهل الخاصة. And so none among the subjects are like this, and weaker in patience during the calamities of time than the elites and people close to you, like your relatives, the privileged people. So Imam salam says, these people, they are the ones who are most difficult to satisfy and less helpful to you and more demanding. So do not put your effort on satisfying them. Rather, think of the people. Think of the general public. Think of the population, the lay people that you are expected to help them, support them as their governor, their ruler. There are many historical examples that supports the insight of the Imam alayhi salam. So, for example, if we consider the fall of the Abbasid Caliphate, it was in 13th century. Under the late Abbasid rule, it was the same kind of policy of favoring the elites was being maintained. So there were those people, the court elites, the bureaucrats, the palace favorites, who extracted wealth, fortune from the state. They lived in luxury. They interfered in matters of state. But when the Mongols attacked, when they approached, these elites were the ones who were unprepared, divided, incapable of defending the states, the corruption, internal rivalries. They contributed to vulnerability of the caliphate and the fall of the caliphate. Many similar examples you see in the history. For example, similarly about the fall of the Ottomans. You see exactly the same pattern there. They are those privileged people who take everything for themselves, who take every opportunity to extract wealth from the rule. They are those favorites, powerful. But at the time of the crisis, there are the less helpful, and there are the ones who betray the people and the country for their own benefits. So you can see many examples of how the insight of Imam has been unfolded throughout the history. So Imam alayhi salam says, so if that's the case, if you understand that these privileged people close to you are not the ones to be trusted, and you should put your trust as the government, you should put your trust on your people Then understand that وَإِنَّمَا عِمَادُ الدِّينِ, indeed the foundation of religion, وَجِمَاعُ الْمُسْلِمِينَ, and the unity of Muslims, وَالْعُدَّةُ لِلْأَعْدَاءِ, and the force against enemies, الْأَمَّةُ مِنَ الْأُمَّةِ, lies with common folk, lies with the lay people. فليكن صغوك لهم وميلك معهم. So let your attention be directed to them and your inclination be with them. So put your whole effort to serve your people, the lay people, general public. Do not get distracted by the demands, unreasonable demands of the people close to you. And these statements are very deep. When Imam talks, for example, about people as Imaduddin, why does Imam refer to lay people as the foundation of religion? It's a pillar of religion. Why is so? Isn't the religion supposed to be for something divine, for example, from the perspective of the Muslims? So why people are considered as the pillar of faith? It can be explained that the public support is essential for flourishment and continuity of religion. If people don't support a religion, no matter how strong the faith is, how well educated the elites are, so on and so forth, the faith cannot continue to exist. There are many historical examples that shows the importance of public support for a faith to maintain its existence. For example, we have in the about the decline of paganism in late Roman Empire, when the Christianity was accepted as the main faith by Constantine. Later on, some Roman Empire emperors, so including the Julian, who was also being called the apostate, they tried to restore the ancient and the old Roman pagan religion, the cult of emperor, in which, for example, the emperor was being considered God, which was the ancient kind of the faith of the Roman Empire. And many elites of the community supported the emperor. Many elites actually they saw that the previous rule, the ancient kind of the previous faith, the ancient pagan faith was more beneficial to them. They could maintain higher social privileges. However, because the people already started to find interest in Christianity at the time, no matter the efforts that these emperors they put in it, they could not change and the faith and restore the old Roman faith, and Christianity, it took over the Roman Empire very fast. And it was due to the people kind of the uh, openness to the faith. And there are many other examples, for example, in the when let's say from the opposite side, when if the rule tries to change, to enforce something against a faith that people they believe in it. It happened, for example, in during the Pahlavi dynasty in Iran. So the King Reza Pahlavi, in the name of westernization, he tried to enforce people to remove the hijab for the Iranian woman, to remove their hijab. However, not only it didn't work because people resisted, because the public is what actually maintains faith, because people resisted not only didn't work, rather some argued that it was one of the reasons that contributed to the later Iranian revolution against the Pahlavi dynasty, because people felt their faith is being threatened by the Pahlavi rulers. So Imam al-Islam mentions that it is the general public and it's the people who are the who are safeguarding faith, who are the pillar of faith, Imaduddin. And then Imam said, وَجِمَاعُ الْمُسْلِمِينَ. And it's if you take care of the public and of the interest of the people, that is what leads to unity among the people. If you want to unify your community, if you want to unify your country, pay attention to the people. If you satisfy them, their hearts gets closer to one another. وَالْعُدَّةُ لِلْأَعْدَاءِ. And these people are the very people who will protect your country against external forces, against invasions, as long as they support you, unlike the privileged and those powerful people who will seek their own interests at the time of the calamities. It's the general public, is the mass that would sacrifice themselves to protect the country which they love. They love. So you can see again, there are so many examples, historical examples that showing this. One example again, we can see the contemporary example of the Iran-Iraq war, which despite the many shortcomings of the newly established Islamic rule in Iran in the matter of the logistic and military equipment, so on and so forth, and being under sanctions, it was the mass mobilization of the people, and not, for example, those trained military, for example, personnel, but it was mainly the people's presence in the frontier during the war that protected the country. So again, a very prime example of what Imam alayhi salam mentions, that they are وَالْعُدَّةُ لِلْأَعْدَاءِ, they are the ones that protect your country. And then Imam alayhi salam starts another point, which is very beautiful. We don't have time, but I just want to give you an overview of what we are going, inshallah, to cover in the next session. And that's about the responsibility of a ruler to cover the flaws of the people, the responsibility of the government not just to not expose their flaws, but to cover them, to be like a father who covers the mistakes of his children. And Imam alayhi salam warns against a kind of approach, a kind of policy that the government tries to police people, tries to watch over people and discover their shortcomings and flaws and secrets and use them against them. And Imam's expressions are very strong here. When Imam talks about those people who are interested in exposing, finding out the secrets and the flaws of the people, Imam says to Malik that these people should be the people that who are most far away from you. They should not be able to even get close to you. And it's a matter of the relationship, the kind of compassionate relationship between rule and the people that Imam alayhi salam in this letter, in different passages, Imam emphasizes and highlights that the relationship between rule and the people should not be the relationship of, for example, of a master and a slave. It's a relationship of a father and a child. The relationship based on compassion. The relationship based on mutual respect. The rule tries its best to serve the people, and it's the people that protect the rule in return. It's a very beautiful kind of perspective of politics and rule that you see Imam alayhi salam portrays in this letter, and inshallah we will cover further in the future sessions. Please recite a salawat.
اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد